So I am from Atlanta in the sense that I live in Atlanta, but I'm originally from India. There are more than two brown people in the house, Jazz. I only rarely steal jokes. So I'm originally from India. It's hot, it's poor, people speak English with a funny accent. Those were my first impressions of the South. And coming here as an Indian, it's kind of funny because you come here and you realize another group of people has dibs on the name Indian, which happens to no one else anywhere. And you're like, they didn't want the name, they got the name 500 years ago, back when they probably couldn't even find India on a map, thanks to an Italian explorer who definitely couldn't find India on a map. And as an Indian comic, I feel like I'm supposed to joke about how other people suspect I'm a terrorist. People don't suspect I'm a terrorist, they suspect I'm a doctor. I mean, I don't mind people suspect I'm a doctor. They think I'm smart and rich and successful, which is a fantasy I share. I'm hoping somewhere along the line someone will suspect I'm their doctor, because that could be lucrative or deadly. There are differing perspectives, probably just deadly, because I don't know how to process insurance. Now, I am optimistic when I say doctor. Maybe people negatively stereotype me. Maybe it's dentist. I mean, look at me realistically. Could be dentist, it could be worse, it could be pharmacist. I hope not. I feel like pharmacists are the hillbillies of the medical world. Like, if you're a pharmacist, your attitude is, I'm gonna get a medical degree, but I'm not gonna work in a fancy hospital. I'm gonna work in a store. Not really a store, but part of a store. Not really part of a store, but like 1/10 of a store. You're gonna walk through the store and come to a small wall of candy, and I'm gonna be behind that. There's the pre-diabetic side and the post-diabetic side of that wall. The way I found out people suspect I'm a doctor, a couple of years ago, the girl I was dating then, she was hit by a car. She's now my ex-girlfriend because we got married. But more about that later. She was hit by a car. She was taken to the hospital in an ambulance. But I drove to the hospital. Unwisely, I didn't walk in through the ER entrance. I walked in through the main entrance, wound my way through these corridors, trying to find the ER of this large hospital. Eventually got to the general area, but wound up at a door that said ER, medical personnel only. And I was like, oh shit. And then I was like, what if I just wait here? And sure enough, 2 nurses held the door open for me. So I have brown privilege. Yeah, I stole some drugs while I was in there, so anyone need any saline? Small batch saline. I only stole a small batch. So yeah, no one has mistaken me for a terrorist, and I would like to do jokes about terrorism, but I don't know much about jihadography. Jihadography. I also don't know much about Al-Qaeda. I feel like I used to know a lot, but now it's just ISIS, ISIS, ISIS. ISIS is everywhere. They're inescapable. ISIS is like Uptown Funk. Like, what happened to Al-Qaeda? Are they gonna do a greatest hits? But say what you will about Al-Qaeda, though, they were ambitious. ISIS is all about taking vehicles and driving them into crowds of people. So now you can't differentiate between a terrorist and a 2-star Uber driver.
Too soon.
You took Uber here? Yeah, too soon. No one's mistaken me for a terrorist. Like I said, I am an immigrant. And I love how diverse and multi-ethnic it is here. You have so many options when you decide to become racist. I mean, I'm not planning to become racist, but I'm planning to become old Preparing my 401k KK. It's not that easy in other countries. Like, think about it. Like, if you're in a homogenous country, like, say, South Korea, you can hate people, but they're the same race. And really, you end up hating North Korea, but they're also the same race, so it's not racist. Just really, it's one nation where the South hates the North, which is plagiarism. Anyway, I guess racism is making a comeback with white nationalism, and I wonder, if you're a white nationalist, what happens if you show up to a rally and you bring a real torch, not a tiki torch? You show up with a real torch and everyone else has tiki torches. Do you think, they don't seem to be into diversity? Maybe I'll just sneak away, find some marshmallows, roast some marshmallows, maybe add a bit of chocolate. Oh shit, that's race mixing. Maybe I'll find a way to hide it between two crackers. That's white. Wow. Yeah. So my name is Chris Martin, and obviously a little funny because I meet people for the first time and they're like, "That's the same name as the captain of the New Zealand cricket team." It's tough, yeah. Yeah, it's tough. No, obviously a lot of Coldplay jokes. I've got waves of Coldplay jokes. I feel like I'm gonna get them all through my life. Even after I die, if I meet God and God says, "So, Chris Martin," I'm gonna be like, is that sarcasm or not? Is this hell or heaven? Don't know. But the way I got my name, I too am Catholics. Any other Catholics in the house? If you're Catholic, give it up for Lent. Give it up for Lent, best Catholic tradition ever. Lasts longer than a billing cycle. Yeah, my parents are Catholic. They decided they would name me after the saint on whose day I was born. And his name turned out to be Saint Cecilia. You see, there's a Catholic sexism loophole. They don't care about your opinion if you're a woman, but if you're a dead woman, they can make you a saint. So Cecilia's not working. Cecil didn't make the cut. The day before I was born, that was the Feast of Christ the King, and they figured it would be irreverent to name me Christ, but they could lop off the T. So that's how I became Chris, the King. And it was interesting coming to the US again, because fewer people looked like me here, but more people could pronounce my name. And that was before I changed my name from M. Night. M. Night, am no longer Night. I'm no longer sure about that joke. Yeah, to be fair, my name was only mispronounced once in India, and it was by a substitute teacher. I know what you're thinking, Chris, why were you even paying attention? She was taking roll, she got to my name, and she said, Charas? And I didn't know this, but everyone else in my class did. Charas is a word in Hindi. It refers to the resin of a plant that is known in Hindi as ganja, which is also known as marijuana. So I was confused, but everyone else thought this was hilarious. So for the next 3 years, I had a dope nickname. True story, true story. What else did I want to talk about? Oh right, Coldplay. Yeah, like I said, I've got this Coldplay joke thing going, and I'm actually not a fan of Coldplay. Their music leaves me a bit lukewarm. But I do like shopping for music in real record stores, and I've noticed vinyl is taking over, which is, I don't know if you have that problem here too, but it's just weird because I don't have a record player, and I don't know anyone who has a record player. So I feel like people who own a record player, they're like people who have a superpower that gives them the ability to go back in time and pick up technology that people in the past considered outdated. Like, what is life like if you own a record player? Do you buy a record, bring it home all excited to play it, and you're walking to your record player and you trip over your telegraph cable? And the record flies out of your hand and smashes into your sundial. If I had a time machine, I would not go back and pick up technology. I would go to maybe the year 1980 or so and go up to random people and say, 2 people, Donald Trump, Bill Cosby, 2 outcomes, president, serial rapist, guess who ends up where? Because everyone would get that wrong. Oh man, Donald Trump. My best explanation for the existence of Donald Trump is that someone tried to reincarnate George Carlin and gave up halfway. That's pretty much my explanation. So, although I guess we have this consensus that the most racist president ever is Andrew Jackson, and the plan is to take him off the 20. I feel like if we really want to make a statement about race, we should keep Andrew Jackson on the 20 and put the Jackson 5 on the 100. Yeah. So, hit a few milestones in my life recently. I turned 40. 40 is when you, thank you. Gets more exciting. I turned 40. 40 is when you walk into a bar and start talking to a young woman, and then you look a little more carefully at her, and you look a little more carefully at your shirt, and then you look at her again, and you realize your shirt is older than the woman. Because plaid is in fashion again. And I also got married. Thank you, no need to applaud my bravery. I got married about 10 months ago. A friend of mine said marriage is a wonderful institution, and I was like, what institution is your baseline for this comparison? Is it jail? Is it middle school? What is it? What is it? But yeah, I dated for a long time before that, but I'm done with dating. Thankfully, I learned through 20 years of dating that my type is women who cry. So I married a woman who cries and likes to watch TV shows where people get slaughtered by serial killers. Usually serial killers, sometimes Cersei Lannister. Any Game of Thrones fans here? I'm gonna give quite a few, right? Wouldn't it be cool if in the last episode, Jon Snow wakes up and realizes the whole time he was actually in Trainspotting? I'd like to see that. She saw an old TV show recently, Knight Rider. Some of you remember that? Some of you remember that? Yeah, I was in a public library because I changed my address, and they actually had Knight Rider on DVD, and I was like, do I get it? Do I not? It's kind of like looking up that person on Facebook you're not sure you want to look up to see where they ended up. But I checked it out, watched a few episodes, and you know, when you're a kid, it's cool, but when you grow up, like if you haven't seen Knight Rider, it's this action-adventure show where this man, this undercover agent, played by David Hasselhoff, who was kind of like the Ryan Gosling of 1982 to 84. He has this really cool car with all these gadgets in it, and he goes around doing cool stuff. But a couple of weird things. First, it's a self-driving car. You can put it on autopilot, and it drives itself perfectly. And Michael Knight, the hero, chooses to turn that feature off 99% of the time, and people trust him to solve crimes. The other weird thing, I don't know if you remember this, but the car would dock inside this large tractor trailer. The back of the tractor trailer, it would flip open, there would be a ramp, and the car would go up. But to make it look really cool, this would happen while both the tractor trailer and the car were moving, which when you're 10 years old looks really cool. When you grow up, you're like, wait, if the car is moving at 30 miles per hour on the pavement, it's moving at 30 miles per hour on the ramp. So really the first episode of that show should have been the last episode of that show. I mean, maybe the writers of the show just grew up in some remote part of America where there were no exit ramps. I don't know. But yeah, like I said, I got married. We're trying to have kids, which is funny because you've got to stop using birth control. You know, when you're young, they say always be cautious, always use birth control, and you take them seriously because you say, okay, I'll be cautious. Like imagine you're a cautious driver. Every time you get in the car, you make sure your seatbelt's fastened, you make sure your rearview mirror is fine. You do this for 20 years, and then one day you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna have a head-on collision. And then you and your wife have to decide whether you stop at 1 or have 2. And then you go on driving, trying to have this collision, and you don't have one, and you're like, what's up with that? Megan had a collision in her own driveway. Anyway, so I'm not using birth control anymore. Didn't realize I was buying condoms out of habit until last week. I went into a gas station, went to the clerk, pointed at the condoms, then remembered I didn't need them. So pointed at something nearby, pretended I wanted that instead. So I'm smoking again. Thank you, everyone.